Wonderful. So welcome everybody. We're delighted to have our second industry information session after the summer kickoff. Today we have careers in technology, and we are going to be talking with Monica, who is a tech recruiter and has industry information that she can share with us, and Zac Novak, who's the founder of CITI, Careers in Technology and Innovation. Before we get started, I will introduce myself and my colleague. My name's Susanna Tawes. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a project lead for the Mentorability Initiative here in Alberta, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator today. I'd like to introduce you as well to Jamie Thiessen. They are my colleague up in Edmonton, who is also a project lead for the Mentorability Initiative. Mentorability is a national initiative that helps develop short-term mentorship opportunities for people experiencing pan disabilities, includes neurodiversity, anxiety, chronic illnesses, to gain experience, industry knowledge, and network connections to take them to the next step in their careers. We would like to acknowledge that Mentorability operates on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples in what is colonially called Alberta, and express gratitude and respect for the land we use. Our decolonial journey, we pledge to dismantle systematic racism within our organization and commit to advancing reconciliation and equitable partnerships as we continue to engage predominantly in Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 territories and the Métis homeland. We recognize that acknowledgement of land is a start, but what is being asked for by Indigenous communities is land back. A little bit of housekeeping for today. We will ask that everyone has their audio on mute, just to make sure that we can hear the conversation. You can ask questions during the presentation through the chat. We'll make sure to monitor that and then have it at the end in our Q&A session. There's closed captioning available through the Zoom platform underneath its options for people that would like that. For today's session, we will have conversation for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and then allow for 15 minutes or so for questions and answers from everyone. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and bring back my video. There we go. Hello, nice to see some faces. That's great. So thank you again for joining us today. I would love if you could introduce yourself, your title and your organization and how you get started. And I'm going to ask if Zachary will start.
For sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My role is I'm the founder of Careers in Technology and Innovation. How did we get started? I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. I spent my career, the beginning of my career in finance. I didn't find it overly fulfilling. I left my job looking to find a place that was more fulfilling in technology. I did coding boot camp, worked in product management, and then I started to learn about community and saw that as a career path for me. So left that for community and started what is currently today CITI as a side project. During the pandemic, we did a Wednesday night meetup and we just got together virtually for about a year and a half, and now we've expanded that into a membership with many services. So that's how I got started, a little bit serendipitous, but like moving away from a corporate linear path into something that was a little bit more purposeful to me.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, Zach. And
You're welcome.
Monica, could you please introduce yourself, your title, your organization, and how you got started?
Yeah, my name is Mônica. I'm a tech recruiter. I work for a small little agency here in Calgary called Teamit. I've been working as a tech recruiter for about 2.5 years now. Prior to this career, I was a gymnastics coach, so it was a big pivot for me. it was about 3 years of a pivot time where I had to take a lot of different courses, figured out where I thought I fit in, lots of networking, meeting the right people, and getting introduced to the idea of tech recruiting. I was at the time really focused on becoming a product manager. But the technical recruiter position kind of came to me because I knew someone who knew someone, and I now am in love with it. So I am officially a technical recruiter for a career for right now.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. It's interesting the different pathways that everyone takes into the tech industry. Um, I myself used to be in tech and then pivoted out of tech and then pivoted back into tech. So it's very interesting to hear different people's stories. Um, the tech industry in Alberta and Calgary has been changing over the last couple of years. There's been lots of growth, and then there's also been a bit of change as well. And I was wondering if I could ask each of you, and maybe we'll start with Monica in terms of talking about the trends that you're currently seeing in the industry when it comes to roles and positions and the different companies.
Yeah, tech has, and I don't think this is just tech. I think the economy has taken a little bit of a slowdown, but it has slowed down definitely for this year. Lots of layoffs, not a lot of companies hiring. My company, I only hire in tech, and it's anything really in tech. But what I'm seeing right now that pops more on my board are project manager, business analyst positions, data engineers, some software developer roles, but not as many as it used to be. Because before, software developers were definitely the main bread and butter consistently. Right now, not as often. But again, because I work for an agency and it's a small agency, I get a drop of the bucket of what the market actually is. So don't take my reality as the only reality. And also a lot of companies, because there have been, like, there is a little bit of a constriction on the market, that means that companies are less willing to spend money on agencies. So we're also the first ones to get cut, right? The budget gets cut from agencies. So it could be that companies are still hiring lots of developers. They just don't want to use my service for it at this time.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. How about you, Zach? What are you hearing and seeing around the trends in the tech industry?
Certainly, I can talk like generally, and then maybe I can touch a little bit on the differences between the Calgary and Edmonton markets, in my opinion, because I do spend time in both markets, although I am located in Calgary. I agree with Monica that we we saw this huge hiring in tech during the pandemic. Interest rates dropped. Essentially, that freed up capital. There's a lot of capital that was going into these companies, and they're hiring. And there's like this digital shift where during the pandemic. Now, a lot of these tech companies assumed that trend was going to continue post-pandemic, and it didn't. We came back and we started living our lives and using less technology, and that snapped back. And over the last 2 years, it's been more difficult, although possible, to find roles in technology. My personal opinion, based on what I'm seeing in the market, is we are normalizing, and I do think the fall is going to be much better than the last 8 months. I just had two members of our community that came out that were deciding between competing offers, and I saw a few more over the summer. So that was very unheard of 6 months ago to have competing offers in the market. That being said, those people that have competing offers are usually in that intermediate to senior role or above. The junior market is still a little bit, or entry level is still a little bit flooded. And there are certain things that you must do in order, and we can talk about that later. So it's a little bit more difficult to get in, but totally possible. We see it all the time. Now, Calgary and Edmonton, if we want to like quickly talk, and I'm going to try not to get into the jargon. The Calgary tech market is generally bigger than Edmonton's, but it's very commercial. So the predominant tech market in Calgary is SaaS, as well as what Monica's
Can I
talking about.
pause you just for a moment when you say SaaS? What
Yeah.
does that mean?
Software as a service. So essentially, like whatever you've hired in the past to have someone do something for you, they've now created software in the middle. Um, so these are like commercial applications of how software is providing a service. The like Benevity, for example, that's a company in Calgary. They're one of the largest companies. They provide a software that allows companies to donate and give to charities and not-for-profits. And essentially, before you're doing this all manual, meeting the charities, sending them the payments, and now they've created a software that's in the middle that makes it very easy for your employees to make that, track that, and have be connected with all. So that's a service that that software is providing. So Calgary is like very commercial, whereas in Edmonton, and I'll say also to Monica's point, and I would like to see if there's agreements here. But there's also a lot of large corporates in Calgary that are doing their digital transformation, and that's where we've seen predominantly the hiring. That's why you're seeing the project managers and the business analysts being hired, technology functions in more traditional industry than tech. I
Yes.
do think tech is coming back. Do you agree?
Yeah, the PM and BA roles that I'm talking about that I'm hiring are for major enterprise like Synovus, Enbridge, that type of company. So it is a technical project that they have within the company, but they are definitely a company outside of tech.
So when you're thinking about where you fit in tech, there's a lot of different avenues, but two of the main ones is, do I want to work for a tech organization that sells a product or service, or do I want to work in a technology department or role that services a business? Like, we talked about the energy businesses, but like a WestJet or CPKC or an ATB. Edmonton actually has more research-based companies. They do have some like software as a service companies, but you'll see more companies that are commercializing research out of the university. And having a little bit more of like a hardware, like a DriveWise or a 0 Point Cryogenics. I don't have all the lists right in front of me, but you see a more broad flavor like you'd see in most tech markets, where Calgary's very, very commercial, trying to find business application for technology versus building more innovative research-based technologies is what I would say is a little bit different between the two, but there's definitely opportunity in both. And the last thing I'll say about Edmonton is a lot of the tech opportunities do sit in government. So a lot of people that there are people in Calgary, but the government is definitely a place you could consider being a technology worker for in Edmonton.
Interesting. Thank you both. I have a question. So when I was pivoting back into tech, kind of COVID-y time, user experience, design, research, UI, so interface was a really hot commodity. And it seemed like every company out there was like, we need UX people, we need UI people. I have not heard either of you mention this. Can you speak to that at all?
I can a little bit, and I can say that you're correct. I have not seen a UX UI specific role. Similarly enough to that, I have not seen a Scrum Master specific role. And I think those two might have similar reasons as to why. What I saw, for example, with Scrum Master role was that when it was first, when Agile was first becoming a thing, and Agile is a methodology for delivering a project that was somewhat new a couple of years ago. And a Scrum Master would be the one that would come in and teach the people how to use Agile, or they might have a title Agile Coach. And they would be the evangelizer of what Agile is in the company. And then as years went by, that responsibility and that knowledge is something that is spread so much and everyone kind of understands what agile is, that there's less of a need for someone that is the main person for it. So that position has now been merged into the project manager or the product manager, or someone else is now taking on the role of a scrum master. So the UX specific role has now, in my opinion, been somewhat merged into a different role, where you're a front-end developer that understands user experience, or right, and it's part of a responsibility. And I could be wrong. It could be that once the market picks back up, UX designers will go back up, but I have not seen UX designer specific roles in quite some time now.
So when we think about a technology organization and those Scrum teams, we generally have about 6 to 10 developers per designer and per product manager. So think about how many more developers an organization needs than these. That being said, I was just chatting with a friend, a CEO of a technology company, a SaaS company, and he has been in the market now for 5 months looking for a designer. And he is having a very hard time finding a designer. So we've been helping him with some intros to design. So these are the type of things I think are positive indicators to the hiring market. In order to get into design, like we didn't talk about like what are the most popular roles, and I think I agree. Data engineering is like right now everyone's trying to figure out their data strategy. So if you're around that data realm, that's really important. And another thing that's happening is the maturity of the market. We're actually seeing less startups and more scale-ups. What happens when you move from, so in your funding cycles, usually this just kind of goes in order. Pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C is kind of how you fund a technology organization. I know that's like fancy terminology, but there's a turn after seed to Series A where generally you are finding product market fit. This just means that your product goes to market and you have good certainty that people are going to buy it in a repeatable way. When that happens, before that happens, your R&D part of your organization, the spend is about double to your sales and marketing. When that happens afterwards, you flip and you kind of can stick with your R&D team and you grow your sales and marketing effort because you know you can have repeat. So when that happens in a company, they're slowing down. They're still going to grow it, but they're starting to build out the maturity around how are they going to acquire customers, which is a big gap in the Alberta market, right? Design's also a big gap. Anything that a traditional, especially in Calgary, an energy company doesn't have salespeople, unless you're in a services company, marketing people, design people. This is a huge gap for our market, in my opinion. There's not a great amount of people that have a lot of experience in it just because of our traditional industries.
Thank you. And to further that conversation another time, one of our community partners, Calgary UX, we're going to work on an industry session there too, so we can get some more detailed kind of thoughts in terms of what's going on there. So I appreciate that, and really looking at also from like a very small tech company to like that medium-sized tech company to a larger tech company and the differences that might happen there. So you mentioned something in terms of like, where do I fit in tech? That kind of brings me to a point of where people are looking at the roles, particularly maybe a specific one. How do they stand out to hiring manager? How can you set yourself apart from others in terms of being noticed for hiring?
You want to start,
Go ahead,
Monica?
Zac. No,
You're
you
the
go.
recruiter. So, okay. Generally, once you find your place, and we can talk about that, like once you have a focus, this is so important. I just want to share this with everyone, where most people get stuck is they don't focus on the place where they fit. And then they brand themselves as multiple things. And hiring companies are looking for someone that's focused in that one area. So a mistake that I see with many of our members is they'll be like product manager, customer success, UX design. I'm like, that's almost half the company that you're trying to say that you fit. So it's like finding the greatest fit. So that's one thing. But once you're past that, right? We talk about in CITI our career pillars. So about a year ago, a year and a half ago, we had like over 100 of our members in line roles, and we did a big survey. And we're like, okay, what are the consistent themes? And one is building a professional brand. So part of that is the focus, but the other one is just like making your LinkedIn, making sure it's got the technology jargon, you're telling a story. So when people, I sent one of our members, I sent a note to a hiring manager today, letting them know that they applied, and the first thing she asked me is send me their LinkedIn. The first thing they're looking at is LinkedIn. So that LinkedIn should match that role. Secondly, is having, especially if you're a designer, you need to have a portfolio, but I am under the opinion that everyone should have a portfolio or a project that they're working on. This differentiates you in the market. And then lastly, which we'll talk about lots, is building those relationships. It is much easier to build these relationships if you're reaching out about what you care about in your professional brand and a project you're working on. So you reach out and say, hi, I'm Zac. I'm working on this project. I'm trying to get into product management. Would love to chat to you about, your experiences and how you tackle that problem. Everyone's going to say yes to that, like a high majority. If you reach out asking, I saw you this job, can you talk to me about it? People want to help, but then you move transactional. And then when you have that meeting with that person, you're actually showing that you've done work, you have agency, and you want to be seen as a peer. That will differentiate yourself in the market. The other thing is just like knowing the company, knowing the culture, understanding what they do, and being very kind of specific in when you're especially talking to hiring managers. When you're interviewing, like if you've made it that way to your interview, is just like, how does that role leverage your strengths? How does the culture align with your values? How does the mission bring out your purpose? And always phrasing your answers to the ways of how the business is going to utilize you to grow. It's key to move away from I this, I that, I did, like I did this in order to support this business result. That person is hiring you. How are they going to support my team to support the business result? So those are kind of the main things I would share.
Yeah, I think Zac hit on pretty much all of the points there. Networking is really important, like you mentioned. Pretty much what you want to do with networking is you want people to know. So the reason why he talks about you being laser focused and knowing what you want, and so that you can be slightly more strategic about the types of people that you're meeting. You might, let's say you figured out you want to be this position or you want to work for this company. So then you start going to all of the events that that company has a stand on, or that that somebody's going to be because they posted on LinkedIn, and then there's a chance that you might bump into them a couple of times, and then you can start a conversation. And the reason for that is you also want to have your persona kind of strongly figured out in a way, so that when Zac is talking to one of his friends that is a founder, and they are talking about, hey, I'm looking to hire a DBA, which is a database administrator, one of you guys' name will come up to his mind. It's like, oh, you should talk to Juliana, and here's her LinkedIn, right? So you want to be on the back of people's minds, and you want your name to be spoken in a room where you're not in. That's your goal with networking. That's your goal with making those connections. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to make connections, make friendships, and build those relationships. But those relationships, what they will do is have your name in the back of the mind of people in rooms that you're not in, so that potentially you can start conversations that way as well. I do think that when you're reaching out to people, Zac has a great point. if you have something in common. Most of the people that have reached out to me that have created long-lasting relationships have started conversations that were actually relevant to things in my career or things that I post on LinkedIn or things that relate to me, so that the conversation was equally enticing to me to have. But because I'm a recruiter, I know that people will reach out to me because they're looking for work and they want to talk to me. So when you're reaching out to recruiters, I would say there's slight leeway on that, because I'm expecting to get candidates just saying, hey, look at my resume, I'm a software developer. But I've had hundreds of people be that person. I've had one person say, hey, I read your post about this difficult time of your life that you posted on LinkedIn. I'm going through the same thing. I want to have a coffee chat with you to talk about how we're going to overcome this. And she's now a friend of mine, right? And because she works in tech, I've talked to her about roles that I am hiring for that were valuable potentially to her, right? So I've had hundreds of people reaching out just for a talk because they're looking for work, handful of people that reached out specifically to something that related and was relevant to me in a different format. So if what you're looking for is potential connection, which could result into something, and networking can result in many things. It doesn't necessarily just result in a new job. It can get you interviews, yes, but it can get you, for example, because of networking, I've been invited to be part of a documentary on how immigrants that are successful in Calgary right now. So if it wasn't for networking, I wouldn't have been part of that. I wouldn't be part of presentations like these if it wasn't for networking. There's so many different, I've been invited to a volleyball competition because of networking. It's just, there's so many different things that networking has brought to me. But obviously I know that as a job seeker, if you're actively looking for work, that's your ultimate want. But you have to keep in mind that we as humans naturally crave connection. So if you tug on the connection, chances are the connection will happen, right? So tug on the connection and make that happen. So that's how you make yourself stand out when you're reaching out, when you're just trying to create connections, is find the connection. When it comes to interview, for me, because I'm just the first conversation, I'm the first screening, the recruiter, you need to know what you're talking about. So if you're coming in saying that you're a product manager, you need to understand the jargon of product management. You need to know the words that describe product management. If I ask you what projects you're working on, you need to understand how to explain how you've done product management. So be confident on the things that you've worked on. If you're new in a career, having side projects like Zachary mentioned is really important. I actually have a couple junior people that when they were talking to me about their side projects that they were working on, they stood out so much that I remember them to this day because they were really interesting projects. And the one thing that I'll say that I like to say to everyone, side projects don't have to be revolutionary. That's the one thing that I see people staying stuck on. Because if you were being revolutionary, you would be starting your own startup. You wouldn't be looking for work. So it can be something stupid that you're just building for yourself. So for example, I'll give an example of what one guy built. He loved beer. And so he built a website that would give him a recommendation of what beer he should drink based on what dinner he was eating that day. So he had to go through the entire process of figuring out how to gather data from different places and how to connect things. And he got stuck in different parts of the project because he didn't know how to fix the problem. So he went through all of that. He built this website. Is it usable? No, it's for him. It's just a side project. But it was something that he built, that he had to overcome problems, find solutions all on his own, and he built it, right? So don't get stuck on what the idea is, just on the fact that you should be doing a side project if you're not already doing it. And I've spoken a lot.
Just very quickly, the more the project has a personal meaning to you, the more you'll shine. Because you'll bring out your personality and you'll stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Do something that you're interested in. Ideally, if it's something that surrounds your own personal mission and purpose, what you're interested in your brand, then it will align with the companies that also are doing similar work. But it's so key because in interviews, saying the beer application that Monica was talking about versus I did a capstone project in my program that 20 other people did, and I had to do it. It's night and day.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you found something you're interested in and you had the agency to go build it shows that you're resourceful, you're collaborative, you'll figure out the job versus saying, I did a project as part of my program, which are great. Those are foundational. But once you do one of them, you need to start doing other ones, or maybe you want to continue that project and make it talk about, hey, this was really interesting to me and I took it to the next level.
Thank you. Um, there's so much to unpack in that part of that conversation. I just want to be cognizant of time too. I'd like to spend the next few minutes around talking about skill sets, education, and experience. So many people could be pivoting back or into tech rather, or getting started. Um, there's questions of, do I need a university degree? What are the skill sets that really stand out that I have to have? And looking at those essential skills as well as the technical skills. Zac, did you want to start? Or either one, you go for it.
Monica, do you want to go? You went off mute.
Sure.
You did it because
When it comes to degrees, I've only had one role in my 2.5 years as a technical recruiter that actually required a degree. And that was because they were in a software product that they needed with an engineer to sign off on something. So it was a specific problem that without an engineer with an APEGA certification, they wouldn't be able to deploy it. So do you need a degree? No. Very rarely I even see it on the job descriptions nowadays. Most of the times, if you don't have, they might say degree or equivalent experience. Now, what does that mean for juniors? That still means that you should be upskilling. And when it comes to the specifics, technical and like personal personality traits and whatnot, that depends on what you're looking for, because tech has so many different types of roles within it. Once you figured out what role you want to be in, different certifications or different boot camps or different types of projects that would be required. So if it's a more technical role, like a developer or a data engineer or desktop support or something like that, then those would require certain types of skill sets or projects that you're working on. Now, if you want to get into more project management, there's the PMI or the PMP, or if you want to get into change management, there's the change accreditation. And those are a little bit harder to get side projects to work on. And they are more about organizational skills and people skills. So it depends on what you're figuring it out. Your specialization would be within tech to figure out what you want.
I'm just going to echo what Monica said. When you're thinking about these things, have a goal in mind. So it's more important. You can take courses and programs to try and understand if that will be a fit for you. That is okay. But once you have like a target, so I would ask you, what do you think your strengths are? What do you think your unique gifts are? What are your values? What's your mission? Where would you want to work? Go meet people in them, trying to do your discovery ahead of time. So you can ask these questions at the beginning of like, what's your day like? These are not the questions to ask if you're looking to get hired, because it shows that you're in exploration. You're building that relationship. It might take 6 months versus you should know what you want if you're going into networking with the idea that someone might be able to hire you. But once you have that goal in mind, go talk to 5 or 10 people in that role and be like, okay, how did you get into that role? When you're looking for hiring, what are you looking for? Some are going to look for credentials. Some credentials are worth more than others, and some are more around learning and equipping you. The key is this going to help me build my credibility with my professional brand? Do others in the market, do I see have this? And a great thing, if you have an idea of which program you want to take, this is a really easy way to network with people, find people in industry, LinkedIn, communities, and say, hey, I saw that you did the PMP. I'm considering taking it. would love to get 15 minutes of your time to talk about your experience with the PMP. Again, shared experience.
What is PMP?
Oh, yes. Project Management Professional Certificate, Monica. I do not have a PMP, but that one seems to hold some weight in the market, so I bring up that one. So asking grads of the programs what they think of it, and then all of a sudden they know, when you ask these questions, they know you're looking for work. You don't have to say it. Uh, um, they'll know. You don't have to like, and then they'll offer advice. And when it comes to technical skills and non-technical skills, because I think that was part of your question, Susanna, generally you do need both. But if you're entering tech, people are going to hire you because you have the non-technical skills and they think you're going to learn the technical skills because those non-technical skills. I actually had a conversation also today with a team lead, and I was asking her, let me see if I can find it here, what they want in the person they're hiring. And this is in a kind of 100-person organization, smaller tech company, but someone that's willing to do different parts of the organization, not focused on one thing. They're adaptable, they're smart, which is kind of a broad word, willing to put in the hours. So this might be a more a place where extra hours are expected. They're resourceful, collaborative, and willing to figure things out. She told me all of that off one question. Now, when you're positioning yourself, A, is that a good fit for me? Does that align with my values? Is that the work environment that I want to work in? If it does, secondly, what am I going to say in my interview when they ask me about my strengths? I'm going to align directly to that. So you do need both. Like, I don't think anyone gets away with not having the technical skills, especially if you're technical. But it's all those soft skills that will show that you can learn the technical skills. And that's why we talk about projects and portfolio, because those are willing to be able to project and portfolio are showing that resourcefulness, collaborating with others, willing to roll up their sleeves. It's a demonstration that they're willing to do that outside of the working environment. So if you lean one way, the other, the thing about soft skills, so like technical skills, you can take courses. Soft skills, there's some programs and certain things, but it's really only learned by doing. But you want to highlight previous successes and translate that into the tech market.
That's great. Thank you. Um, we just have a couple more minutes. I have a feeling there might be a lot of questions. So I want to make sure that we're leaving room for that as well. Um, I guess in terms of just like not a fast, but kind of a closing question before we move on, would be if I'm looking for an entry level job, I'm listening to everything you're saying, I've kind of followed through. How do I find out who is hiring for those types of positions? Are there better places than others to go?
Well, there's a few different places you find these things. Like you can go on Indeed or certain job boards, and that's certainly an avenue. But once you're doing that, you're in the masses, is my personal opinion. You want a relationship at that company, even if you apply, you can say that you apply. But we, based on this is not like I don't have research, but we know that a lot of roles that are posted are already spoken for by an internal candidate or even an external candidate, actually, in times. So they post as like a checkbox exercise, but they already, you want to be the person in mind. So how do you do that is instead of looking for roles, because where the magic happens is actually approaching a company that's thinking about hiring that role and they haven't posted yet. I would say target companies. If you have a list of 10 that you're targeting those companies and building relationships in, eventually one of them are going to hire the role you're looking for. And if they already have a relationship with you, a lot of people don't want to go through the process of hiring. This is why they hire Monica. And for junior roles and then senior roles, Monica's doing a lot of research to understand who might be looking that's currently working as well. But you want to be top of mind. So instead of like, once the role is posted, it's like the most difficult time to network into that company. So trying to find those companies and meet with them and connect with them and ask them about their hiring plans is another approach. That being said, I wouldn't say like you can ban applying online. It's really difficult. We've over 300 of our members, land roles in tech, and it's like 80% did it with some sort of referral, hidden job market. Monica, when you got your role, did you apply?
No. I knew someone who got an email saying, hey, do you know someone with this personality? And this is actually something that I wanted to mention. When you're pivoting, if you guys don't decide to pivot into tech, but you decide to pivot into something else, having some sort of a flexibility in your mind can also be helpful. Like you're targeting product management, but you get a customer support role, potentially that could get you into getting into product management, or you'll love customer support, right? And one thing that I know Zac mentioned earlier was that being specialized is really important. The Canadian market, or sorry, the North American market definitely dictates specialization, not generalization. That's what the market requires, which is different from different parts of the world, which prefer people that wear multiple hats. But that is also different, like he also mentioned, depending on the size of the company, depending on where they're at in their stage. If they're really early stage startup, most of the time they like people that can wear multiple hats, because the reality is they can't hire a person for every different role. So you being able to do a little bit of project management and also a little bit of something else could be very valuable to them. So if you are more of a generalist, if you are someone that you would prefer to work in things that will pick different parts of your brain, once you figured out that what realm of the space you want to work in, find companies that would want something like that. So a big enterprise wants a specialized person. They want a specialist. You know that one problem, and you're going to fix that one problem for a high price. But a small startup, they have all of these different problems, and they can pay one person to fix all of them. So just that's why we're talking so much about know what you want, so you can be laser focused on your search, which will help with figuring out who to connect with, what types of companies to connect with. We have a couple stories that we know. There was this one guy, he was just doing projects for 4 specific companies that he was wanting to work with, and he was building things based on their product, and he was posting it on LinkedIn. And then one day a company that wasn't one of the ones that he was targeting reached out to him and said, hey, we're actually building that exact product that you just posted. You want to come work for us? Because like he built the thing that they were trying to solve. So you don't know what your laser focused search might bring you, but being a little bit flexible about it can also give you the leeway in, which is also how I got into tech, right? I really wanted product management, but the people that knew me knew my personality, knew who I was, knew my strengths. And because of that, I was referred into a technical recruiter role, which funnily enough, I think I like it more than I would have if I was the product manager. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting that I think that's some really good advice there. We're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to pass it over to Jamie. They've been keeping track of the chat here, and there's some questions that have come up.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Monica and Zachary. It's been a really great, informative conversation so far. Our first question is from Andrew, who has a background in networking and IT support, and he's wanting to know how he can be more strategic in his networking on LinkedIn, especially taking into consideration if you don't have a pro account that you only have that limit of 5 in-mails per month.
I'd say why. Well, my first answer would be a question: why are we only focusing on networking on LinkedIn? Because though it is a networking platform, that is not the best way to network. It can be useful, but if there's a reason to why you can only network on LinkedIn, then we can work around that. But if you have the ability of going to in-person events, having that first in-person conversation, or an event like this today, for example, and then reaching out to someone that some sort of a connection happened, chances are you're going to get a higher rate of response than you would have if it's just a cold message, right? Like, hey, I found you. And all of the other things that we talked about earlier. Like, find an actual point of connection. You studied in the same course, or you're looking to study something. You'll have to find what the connection is. Like, find the connection and make that the reason why you're connecting. That could yield you better results. But yeah.
For LinkedIn specifically, like, just if I totally agree with Monica. Like it's one strategy. Again, you should have a very good LinkedIn profile, because the first thing that person's going to do is click on your profile before they decide if they're going to talk to you. Your outreach, I know it's like you can use your email, but you can do a connection request with a message. In that connection request or in that email, quickly introduce yourself, even just saying what your name is. Like, don't just jump into your ask. Why you pick them. That's the shared experience, right? Why did you pick them? What is your ask? So are you wanting coffee chat? Are you looking for a resource or a connection? And then close with a thank you. You got to be real. You can use ChatGPT to help you. Don't overdo it. But like, the big thing is write it out, and the key is getting down to the smaller bit. And then the other thing is, if you see anyone that's a mutual connection, just ask for an intro. So that's one thing I do a lot. Like, if I see someone, I see my mutual connections, someone knows them, ask for the intro.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Our next question came from Navjeet, and she's wondering about, so her focus is in payroll, and she's wanting to know how can looking for a part-time payroll job in Edmonton sort of fit within the tech industry.
All these tech companies have payroll. That being said, like, you're probably trying to look for companies that are at least 100+ employees. Because again, to Monica's point, once a company gets big enough, it can have that specific payroll role, but the first thing a company is like just a finance person, and they're going to do everything. And if you're just focused on payroll, there's got to be enough people on payroll. So 100 or 200+. In Edmonton, that's, I guess Calgary too, it limits your search. There's like Jobber, there's like DriveWise. I'm trying to think who else is over 100. And Jobber's remote versus like an ATP has a big tech department, or the government has a big tech department, and they'll have more payroll roles. And then it's like, why would we hire you to do our payroll versus someone that's worked in tech? So understanding that mission and values alignment. So work environment, and then it's like finding, like, that's where like the part-time is actually maybe more interesting for startups. In scale ups, they might just need someone on a fractional basis. And if you want to consider yourself like a part-time person, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of bundle you. Now that's getting a little bit more creative. So that's the suggestions I always make. Like, I think you can go smaller if you're doing part-time.
Navjeet, did you want to clarify something?
I couldn't make a note of all the companies he was talking about. So I have a little bit of an auditory.
I
Yeah.
have a list of Edmonton tech companies. I don't know, Jamie, maybe you can send me an email and I'll send it to you.
Absolutely.
And then in Calgary, there's an easier one I can put in the chat of the top 100. Someone has done this work already. But this is the top 100 for Calgary. There's not a list like this on the internet for Edmonton, but I have a list of 40 I can send.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll follow up with you, Zachary, and forward that on to you, Navjeet. Thank you. And then we have a great question from Catherine here. who, you've talked about, focusing and lasering in, but also on being flexible. So how do you show that willingness to take on multiple roles and being flexible without appearing like you're inconsistent or indecisive or having like too many things going on?
Again, I think this is knowing your audience a little bit, because if you know that it's a startup, or if you know that it's a company, like when you read the job description and you see that it's a position that is requiring multiple hats, you know that when you sell yourself as someone that has done X, Y, and Z and can do A, B, C, that will be taken well. But if you look at a job description, or you know that the company hires for, I need someone that can do this, this, and this, and this, this, and this, and it's always it's always the same, 1, 2, 3 things. Then in that position, you have to be specialized, right? So it requires a little bit of critical thinking when going into those conversations, where you have to analyze the situation and be like, this is a place where me being a multifaceted, multiverse person will bring value. So I'm going to show that. And it's knowing how to tweak, how to sell yourself. Interviewing and networking and these things, it's all technically sales. It's just that you're selling yourself, and you have to figure out how to do that sales pitch of yourself. Sometimes your sales pitch will have to be specific to being more specialized, and sometimes you'll be more generic. Sometimes you're going to be more focused on your very technical skills, because that's what the company is requiring, and sometimes it's going to be more on your personality traits, or on the ways that you've dealt with problems. Or just yesterday, one of the clients that I'm hiring for asked my candidate, what would be a reason why I should not hire you? Like, I never expected a question like that, but you have to know how to sell yourself even on that, right? So it's knowing how to have that pitch, and that might require you to have that conversation with people over and over and over again, so you feel confident on that conversation. But again, confidence a lot of the times will also sell you as not just someone that is not certain about things, but just someone that is strong in lots of things, if that makes sense.
My quick thought on this is, like, get your resume to match the role that they're looking for. And then when they ask you questions about your willingness to do everything, just give examples how you've done multiple things. I wouldn't try to show that in your resume, because they're getting too many resumes. And the first thing when people look on resumes is just like, are they a fit for this role? And then they kind of get into culture and values alignment after that.
Great. So those were all of the questions that I had come up in the chat. If anybody else wants to throw in a question or raise their hand to ask a question, but while we're giving folks some time to do that, I do have a question that I wanted to ask for somebody who wasn't able to come here today, but is looking forward to the recording. And for that, it's a lot of people with disabilities struggle with doing that good first impression, right? When you're doing networking, and because of the barriers that you face, maybe you can't present that super confident, "Hi, how are you?" sort of persona. How do you what advice would you give to folks who are afraid of, they don't have that confidence, but they still want to go out and network. They still want to get their point across without, their disability holding them back?
First thing that I say to that is find the communities that are open, and the people that are open to meeting people like that. There are lots of people here in Calgary that are fairly open and vocal about being inclusive and wanting to have a diverse team. Those are people that will immediately try harder to not take those things as a negative when meeting you. The second thing that I like to say, does it have to be just the first impression? Because if that's where you're stopping yourself, then potentially you're cutting yourself short as well. And that's not just you, whoever I'm answering to, but you as a person in general, where sometimes first impressions, even for neurodivergent people are also not good, but then you go to the second impression and it works out, and then you get a connection that way. So don't stop yourself on the first. The third thing is make sure that you're going to networking events that are specific to things that you feel comfortable. So networking doesn't have to be going to an event and watching somebody present, and it doesn't have to be that. There are other forms of networking. For example, this Saturday, I'm going to a softball tech competition. So it's just different tech companies going to play softball together. That's networking. I saw somebody posting about going on a wine tasting. That's tech, right? I've hosted board games. Zac hosts, well, a slew of events consistently, and they're all very different to help people feel comfortable in those spaces. So find one where you feel more comfortable, where it feels less transactional and more like meeting people, making friends.
Yeah, I would just like a little bit of a use Gateways network. This does a community. If you're going to a community meetup, just kind of let the organizer know that you're coming. You're a little nervous. It's your first meetup. That you'll be there, and that you're going to come and say hi, and they will help you once they know who you are. It's the hardest thing with a meetup is when you're first there, you don't know anyone, and we gravitate in person to the people we know. So if you have someone that's going to sponsor you, either the meetup organizer or someone that you know that has gone, and say, hey, let's go together, or a friend that wants to go as well. Everyone is different, but almost everyone has some sort of level of nervousness when they're walking into a networking event. Some are more than others, for sure. But the whole point of these events is to meet new people. So people will be open. But if you can find a sponsor, and it can be as simply as just sending a note to the organizer, be like, I'm excited to come, feeling nervous. I'll come say hi to you if you can introduce me to a couple people. There's no way they're going to say no to that. That's exactly why they build these communities, is to help people. But they're not going to know who you are or how to help you, likely. If you like sending that note ahead of time, letting them know you'll be there, and then you walk up and you're like, hey, I sent you the note. They'll be like, oh, yeah. You don't even have to get into the discussion that you're nervous during the actual networking event. They'll already know.
That's a great piece of advice. I never would have even thought of that in terms of just reaching out. Yeah, thank you for that. We are at 3 o'clock. That being said, we have another question that's come up. We want to respect time. So would you be able to answer another question before we finish? And if not, that's totally fine. And we can do this offline as well.
Happy to.
If it's real quick.
Okay, real quick question.
Yes.
Go
For
ahead,
sure.
Jamie.
So Oksana has asked, what are the first 3 things a hiring manager checks when looking at a resume for the first time?
I'm sorry I laughed with that question. There's no answer to that. The answer is it depends. We're all humans. Everybody has different opinions. We all have different ideas of what we all want. The companies are hiring for different reasons, different specs, different aspects. So there's never a specific thing that they're looking for. Each person has a different thing that they're going to be looking for. Yeah. So the answer to that is it depends, which is the answer to most of the questions that I get asked most of the time.
I would very quickly add, like, I look at a lot of resumes. We're hiring a marketing intern for January. I'm just getting some resumes in, and this person applied, and the first thing it said was data analyst. And I'm just like, I don't even read the rest of the resume. Like, the only thing I would say is, like, wherever the top of your resume is, like, whatever the role you're looking for, make sure that's the role that's being talked about, not a different role. And then I think they'll keep looking. But the mistake I see is, and you need different resumes for different roles if you are looking at different roles. But that, from my perspective, that's the first thing I'm looking for. And then I put all the people with the right role in a pile, and I start reading through them.
Thank you so much. We're going to end the conversation here because we have gone over time. If there is any follow-up questions, we can take that offline and maybe send those to Monica and Zachary for later. I want to thank both of you for coming here today and spending the time with us and really sharing some honest insights and your experience. It's been so useful and so insightful. And I would also like to say that we will send a follow-up email to everyone with a feedback survey. It goes to a third-party auditor that is looking at how the mentorability program is working, what works well, what do you like, and what we can do better. And as this is recorded, we will be sending out a message when the recording is available. And it looks like Zach and Monica have already put in their LinkedIn on the chat there. So I will include those in our follow-up email as well. So thank you again very much. And we hope to see you next time at our next industry information session. And Jamie, what is our next information session?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. The next one, September 18th with ACI Architecture. They are an employer partner of Mentorability located here in Edmonton, and they are going to be talking about architecture design, 3D modeling, and all of that fun stuff that goes into architecture.
So some tech there as well. That's wonderful. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.